Welcome to the Lift Heavy Run Long podcast. My name is Wilson Horrell and my co-host is Vaughn Rawls. You can find us at www.liftheavyrunlong.com or on Twitter and Instagram at LiftRunLong, or feel free to email me directly at wilson@liftheavyrunlong.com. The mission of LHRL is simply this: to inspire and be inspired. Tune in every week as we speak with some of the world's most interesting people. Enjoy the show and find your bliss. Well, welcome to the LHRL podcast, episode 22, and our guest today is Ms. Sara Hendershot. Most of our listeners probably will think I'm making this up. The resume is so impressive that they're just not even going to believe me, but this is all true. Sara graduated from Princeton University in 2010, was captain of the women's Princeton rowing team, is a two-time world championship performer. 2010, 2011, and also competed in the 2012 Olympic Games, and also got silver in the 2013 World Cup. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, that's all right.
Look at that.
But we didn't say what she does. What kind of athlete are you?
So I'm a rower. I am a lifelong athlete. I grew up playing tons of different sports and ended up finding rowing. So yeah, most of my athletic success was in that sport.
You've been in the athletic field as long as you can remember?
Yeah, and I remember competing from a really young age, too. Like, as soon as I figured out you could win a race, it was never, sports weren't just for fun, it was to win. So, yeah, I was in a pool when I was about 4 or 5. I was playing soccer from around the same age, too, t-ball. And then my main sports that I ended up really growing up and focusing on were soccer. I played that all through high school. Was kind of trying to decide if I wanted to play that in college. I swam this all through high school as well, and then found rowing at age 14 and started as a freshman in high school.
Where did you grow up?
So I actually was born in Boston and grew up in Marblehead, Massachusetts until I was 12, and then my family moved to Connecticut, so I went to middle school and high school in Simsbury, Connecticut, and that's where I found rowing, and that's where my family still lives.
So swimming and water sports is pretty commonplace around that area?
Rowing wasn't that common when I was in high school. Actually, we were one of the few public high schools that had a rowing team at the time. It's gotten a lot more popular, and now there are a bunch more, but there were only really like 5 teams for us to compete against in the public high school division. And now with Title IX and just with women's rowing gaining popularity, a lot more Connecticut schools have popped up. Especially where I grew up. I'm more like northwestern corner of Connecticut, so we're not near the shore, versus the Connecticut seaboard was a little bit more active in that space.
Can you tell me what Title IX is?
So Title IX is the rule that came into effect in the late 70s that essentially said that all collegiate programs need to spend the same amount of money on women's programs and teams as they do for men's. And what that ended up doing is most programs that had a football team needed to find a way to offset that with a women's sport. And because rowing is an expensive sport, it has a lot of expensive equipment, and you can host a really big team, a lot of colleges started to give out scholarships to women for rowing. And that's really how I actually got involved. I was looking for a way to go to college to play a sport. I thought it was going to be swimming. I ended up injuring my shoulder and really realized that I wasn't going to be able to take that much further. I could probably play soccer at a Division III school, but I wanted to go D1. I wanted to really be a college athlete, and somebody told me, hey, you could get into college for rowing. You're really tall. You have an aerobic base already from swimming. Why don't you try that?
At what point does it hit you that, hey, I could be the world champion at this at some point?
I would say it probably didn't really hit me until I was in college, but what was unique for me, I went to Princeton. The Princeton Boathouse hosts the national team out of that same boathouse. So that's something that's pretty unique about my college experience, is that I was going to class, coming down to the boathouse for practice, and there were Olympians in the boathouse with us. And so kind of being in that tight of space with these girls and figuring out who they really were as people more than these just like big magical stars, I sort of started to realize like, okay, yeah, like I could kick it with these girls. But I would probably say I got more interested in the idea of that watching the 2008 Olympics. I was glued to the TV. I was in high school, 2004 Olympics. I was glued to the TV watching that. Our women brought home silver that year, and it just so happened that in the women's 8, it just so happened that one of those women from the women's 8 was from my hometown, and so she came home that summer with her silver medal to our high school boathouse, and I was just in awe. And then she actually went out in the boat with us, and I somehow finagled myself to be in the seat like right behind her because I wanted to row right next to this Olympian. And so that's really what kind of made me think like, yeah, I want to try this thing and see how good I could be at it.
Well, that's awesome that you were able to do that. How were you training at this point? Did you have like a separate coach, like a high school coach, or what were you doing to get better?
I just had my high school coach that his name's Mark Raymond. He's still at the program at Simsbury High School. He actually coached my little sister because my little sister is 9 years younger than me and just went through the same process. She's a sophomore at Michigan now rowing. He was my main coach. I was doing a lot of research on my own. So reading things, like trying to figure out what are the other top athletes doing. I found out that there was a development program on the national level for young rowers, and I applied to it and made my coach write me a recommendation, and I got in. And that was a really cool experience for me because I was always such a competitive kid growing up, and I felt a little bit like an oddball in that way. Like I wanted to compete in absolutely everything. I was that way in the classroom to the point where I think I was a little bit annoying. I was that way on the soccer field. Like I wanted my teammates to work as hard and be as competitive as I was. And so when I went to this development camp, all of the girls there were the same as me. They were all like crazy competitive. We couldn't sit at the cafeteria without coming up with some game to play against each other, or who was going to eat more whipped cream, or silly things like that. So starting to get myself involved in the national team recruiting system from that point really kind of was what got me kicked into the next gear, because they do give you some information on the kind of times that you should be going for and the ways that you can get to those places.
Well, and throughout all this time, you have another life, correct? I mean, you're either participating in school or participating in a job, or does something like this take up, is it a full-time gig training for the World Championship or the Olympics?
No, it's a full-time gig in that you're spending that much time doing it. You're spending 8 hours a day pretty much with all of your practice and then recovery and chiro or PT and nutrition prep and all of that. But the sport of rowing nationally is not a very funded sport. The USOC does give some money to US rowing top athletes, but even that is very strictly allocated to only the very top athletes. So when I was first coming in as a just new graduate from college, I didn't make that cut to be funded. So I was babysitting a lot. I was working a part-time job. For this whole last 4 years that I was training, I was working a part-time job at a PR and sports marketing firm called Smack Media. And really, like, that's what all the athletes do. You have to find something that you can fit into your schedule in between practices. And sometimes you get lucky. Like I have a boss that's amazing and was super flexible and was willing to let me work remotely from all corners of the world as long as I got my work done. But you have to kind of be creative about that because you're supporting yourself in addition to going after this big dream.
Right. Well, when you set your sights on becoming a world champion and you reach that goal, is there any sort of, once you get there, was it everything that you had hoped for, or is there a sense of, I got here and now what? Or is it immediately right back to the grindstone and going after the next year's world championship?
No, it was amazing. It was everything you'd expect it. The one that I won in 2011 was really, really special. That was in Bled, Slovenia, which I feel like is this little hidden corner of the world. The race course that we got to race on was so unbelievable. It was in the middle of the Alps, and so there are mountains just like right up on the edge of the lake. There's this island with a stone church in the middle of it that you could swim to when races were over, and a castle overlooking the race course from a cliff. So winning a world championship on a course like that was so cool. It was perfectly timed for me because I came back entering into the Olympic year, which is always a really big grind year and really tough because the competition gets fierce. So I came back into that year on this high from having won a gold medal, feeling like I'm a world champion. I just set my mark on the national team. Like I showed that I belong here. It was everything that I had hoped it would be, and then some, really. And I remember feeling like that high extended me all the way through February. The team wasn't fully selected until the end of June. So then, as you're getting closer and closer, you have to find something else to keep you going. But it was a pretty incredible experience.
So you're a pretty aware person. You're enjoying the journey and taking it all in, as opposed to just having the blinders on and saying this is what I want, and everything that comes in between here and then is irrelevant.
I definitely did enjoy it, and I made a point of that. I think I did a better job of that actually within this past Olympic cycle leading up to Rio. Even though I didn't end up making the team, I really wanted to enjoy the process, and I realized that by making that a goal of mine, I ended up doing better and performing better and hitting all of my personal bests and feeling like I really was reaching my potential because I was letting myself enjoy all of the mini goals that I was hitting along the way. And I do think that's important, because if you don't let yourself stop and recognize what you're doing and the greatness of it and enjoy your successes, then really kind of like, what's the point? And it's going to be over before you know it, and then you're just going to be looking back on the glory days and wishing that you had done that when you were, in the situation.
Well, I read that. I was reading your article in Sports Illustrated. I could sense that there was a great deal of learning that you had learned from your previous experience, and that there was also a lot of humility there, that there was a lot to be learned and a great appreciation for where you were. And you said you were carrying that into some of your clients or into your work. And one of the quotes, and I'm going to butcher this, but it was essentially saying, we don't run from our fears, we run towards them.
Yeah, that's really something that I took away from the last 2 years especially, and I feel really lucky that it's changed me as a person for the good, I think. I hope that I can pass that on to others, just because I've realized how important it is. If you don't use what you're doing in the moment, especially when you're trying to do something that's bigger than you, and you don't let it seep in or try to find the good in every situation and use it to make yourself better, then I just kind of think you're wasting an amazing opportunity. What I was doing over the last couple of years was a little bit different. So my first 2 years on the national team, as I was training for London, I was training with the training center, the U.S. Training Center, which is out of Princeton, New Jersey. It's the main camp for rowing at the national team level. There's one head coach, and he usually keeps a camp of about 25 to 30 women, and you train together all year, and then at the end of the year, the team is selected down to a team of 14 in the Olympic year and a team of 18 in a non-Olympic year. So it's pretty intense because you're around these women every day, and you get really great competition by being a part of that group. But for the last couple of years, I actually was training outside of that group. And I chose to do that because I was getting really, really injured under the training plan at the training center, and it just really wasn't working for me, wasn't helping me reach my potential. So I made this big, scary leap to jump outside of it and try to find something that would work better for me. And that was a very scary thing, really, really scary. And through that process, I realized how to embrace fear and how to embrace the unknown and just to become a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's a lesson that I'm just going to carry on into the rest of my life.
Wow. So tell us more about that decision that you made, and what is it?
Sure. So essentially the old plan that I was following was the way that most of American rowing is structured right now. We sort of follow this long, slow distance approach where you gain most of your fitness through volume. And that absolutely works for a lot of athletes. And it worked for me the first time around. But it ended up catching up with me, and my body couldn't handle that much volume. And what I didn't realize was that it was my body mechanics that were getting in the way. So I wasn't moving very efficiently, and I wasn't moving very well. and I was putting my body into compromising positions and ended up getting stress fractures in my ribs and then like low back disc issues. And then what ultimately pushed me out of the training center was this hip problem where I could not sit for almost 12 months. And you got to be able to sit if you want to row in a boat because that's the position you compete in. So I left the team and went looking for help. And I actually got really lucky. One of my teammates from the 2012 Olympics, Erin Cafaro, invited me to come and work out with her in California. And I worked with Erin and her husband, Brian McKenzie. And they were really the catalyst for me to get going in this new sort of training. And the main focus of working with them was to get me to move differently and to move really well. And so we worked on all my motor patterns, all of my central nervous system being rewired, and essentially retaught myself how to row, which was extremely scary, especially thinking like, okay, I'm at the most elite level that I can be in my sport, right? Like I went to the Olympics, I almost won a medal, like I probably know how to row, right? But I had to essentially humble myself and like start from square one. And so skill was the biggest focus. But with that, I ended up sort of taking what I learned from Erin and Brian and then going off and training in this way where we were focusing more on intensity, more on strength work, and less of a focus on volume, more of a focus on quality. Everything that we did was always with the intention of taking as many good strokes as possible, ingraining really good habits, making sure that when we were out on the water, I was fresh enough that I could really perform well with high quality. And then by focusing on the strength aspect of everything, I just created this foundation that made me way less susceptible to injury. And I never got hurt again. I broke all my best personal records. I think I was rowing better than I'd ever rowed. It really just worked for me. And then ended up working for my partner that I trained with, and now is working for a lot of other rowers that we're passing this on to.
Was that sort of the way that you grew up training, was just kind of kill every workout, crush it, go after everything 100%, and then you got to this training that was a little bit more controlled, is what you're saying?
Well, what I would say actually is, as I grew up, like hard work was always my magic thing. Like I would say, oh, I'm just going to outwork everybody, and that did get me to a certain place. But looking back on it now, I'm realizing that I was inclined to work out in this more high intensity way from a young age. So when I was on swim teams, I liked the coaches that gave us programs like this, that were more high intensity, quality driven, and less about just getting the yards in the pool. And then when I was in college, Princeton has such a high academic standard that they just don't have time to hold two-a-days every single day. So our coach ran a similar program where every day you came down, we were doing something intense, you had to row really well, and you weren't down there for hours. You were just in and out 90 minutes, go back up and do your work. And so it wasn't until I got to the national team that I really started to get exposed to this high volume type training, and I just don't think that was for me. It's not for every athlete. My body didn't like it. I was always just super, super fatigued. I didn't feel like I was able to perform my best on rowing tests or during races because I couldn't dig myself back out of that hole. And it wasn't until I allowed myself to shift back to what I think I'm just more adapted to doing, that high-intensity skilled focus, that I just really took off.
Well, backing up a little bit to getting into the Olympics, you're kind of over here doing this, and your teammates were over here doing this. When you're linked up with your team to perform in the Olympics, does someone set up that team, or is this a group of girls that you form yourself and y'all go try out for an Olympic team? Tell me how that works.
So there are a few different boat classes. So there's the women's single, women's double, women's pair, and then there's the women's quad and women's 8. So a coach from the training center holds a camp and selects the women's quad and the women's 8. They choose which girls they're going to invite to that camp, and they make the combinations, and they try to find the fastest athletes to put in those boats, and then they're the ones who name the team. For the single, double, and pair, those are trials events. So you can show up to that race with any partner that you want, and you just have to be the fastest on the day. And so that's actually how I ended up making the Olympics in 2012. I was at the camp trying to make the 8 or the quad. It looked like I wasn't going to make that team, so I grabbed a partner from quad selection, and I basically said to her, hey, I don't think you're going to make the quad. You should come row the pair with me. And she believed me, and we were right, because I don't think she would have made the quad. And then we got in the pair together and ended up having to go up against 2 world champions, that had just come home from breaking the world record in the women's 8 at a World Cup, and they got pushed out of the women's 8 and so raced to try to become the women's pair, and we ended up beating them. And so just because we showed up on that day and we were faster when it counted, we got to go and be the 2012 Olympic women's pair.
And you didn't know this girl prior to this?
I had known her for the 2 years that I was training on the national team because she was at that camp as well. And we had spent a little bit of time together in a pair because the way that the camp works is that you switch partners constantly. So you'll get one partner and you'll row with them for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you'll start to be getting really good with them, and it's time to switch, get a new partner. I think part of the reason that they do that is because they want you to row all the same, so the more different people that you can row with, the more you guys blend your rowing styles. Also, you learn a ton from rowing with different partners, which is always very beneficial. But I had a lot of natural speed with this girl, Sarah. She's also Sarah, so we became the Sarah pair. We happened to be in the women's 4 in 2011 together that won the world championship. So we definitely had a history together. We have amazing chemistry, which is something that I think is undervalued in this sport a lot. We just click. Our personalities click well together. Our technique clicks well. And so I had a gut feeling that we were going to be able to pull this off, and we did.
And after that, how does your life change? I mean, once you become an Olympian, what is that feeling like? Do they come in and say, this is how you're going to live, and this is how you're going to do, and this is how it's going to be, or are you just as free as you were before you got in that position?
Well, definitely one of the best days of my life was the day I was named an Olympian. Because we were the underdogs, we weren't supposed to win. And in very dramatic fashion, we made this trials race probably as heart-wrenching as possible, because at the halfway point, we were down 5 seconds, and it did not look like we were going to win. My parents are crying on the sideline thinking that, oh, our dream didn't come to fruition, they're not going to make it. And then we had a crazy sprint and surprised everyone and ended up winning by a couple of seconds. So crossing that finish line was just this huge feeling of relief and just like complete elation that the years that I had been putting into this like meant something, and finally like I like was going to be able to go and show like all this hard work on a world stage. That was amazing. Other than that, not like a ton changed right away, because I got a little bit of funding, which was nice, from the USOC for making the team. Your ticket and your trip and everything to the Olympics is all set up by the USOC, so that's really special. Gear day, when you're going through processing at the Olympics, is the coolest thing ever. It's Christmas in July. You get all this amazing gear. And then actually being at the Olympics was incredible. And then yeah, like coming home, the only tattoo that I have is the Olympic rings, and so like that really feels special. It's something I get to see every day. When people notice it, they want to know like, where did you go, like what happened, tell me your story. So like that is something that has changed, because I feel like it's given me the ability to tell my story now to a lot of people. But other than that, you know, rowing is still not a super visible sport in our country, so it's not that much different than it was before. It just kind of gave me feeling like I had accomplished what I'd been working so hard for.
Wow, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about what that must have felt like. I need to go get the Olympic tattoo just talking to you.
So what's it like being there? I'm fascinated with being able to speak to somebody who actually went to the Olympics as an athlete. I mean, obviously you compete. I mean, is there a time where you walk around and like watch other sports, or what do you do while you're there?
Yeah, so rowing is a first week sport at the Olympics, which is awesome, because that means the second week you are free to do whatever you want. London was a really amazing experience. I figure that it's probably going to be unique. They put on the best 2 weeks that I could ever imagine. So when you show up there, you get your whole own customs. There's like an Olympic customs that you go through. You get the Olympic London stamp on your passport. Like, that's pretty awesome. And then for us, the rowing venue was actually 45 minutes away from the center of the city, so we stayed in a rowing village while we were competing, and we're kind of like on lockdown just with the other rowers, really just focusing, resting, getting ready for competition. I was the very first rowing event of the entire Olympics, so I didn't get to walk in opening ceremonies because I was asleep really early the night before. But then I was done by day 5. So that was pretty cool, because once I was finished, I got to spend time with my family. I didn't sleep for like 3 days straight. I couldn't talk after that because I'd just been partying so hard. Like, I didn't want to miss anything. So I felt like I just like went to everything that I got invited to. I went to the Oakley party, like I went to the Nike house, and then I tried to watch as many events as I could. So I went and saw beach volleyball, men's water polo, some gymnastics, different things like that. And you just try to support your other Team USA members. And then you really then we got to move into the main Olympic Village. So that was really cool. And you go into the cafeteria and it feels like you're on a college campus with all the most beautiful athletic people in the world. And I just really tried to make as many connections as I could, meet as many athletes as I could, talk to them. And yeah, it was magical. It was nothing short of magical.
Is the partying as badass as I want to believe that it is?
Yeah, it is. It really is, because great. You think about what we have been doing, right? Like most of these athletes put in 4 years of insanely rigorous work, and where they're monitoring their diet, where they're not drinking any alcohol, where you're going to bed at like 8 o'clock. That was my bedtime, 8 o'clock, and I was up at 5 every morning. I had to miss all of my friends' birthday parties, weddings. I like missed some holidays and stuff like that. So once you're finished, it's like you're let loose. And what was really funny to me was there's a McDonald's inside the Olympic Village cafeteria. There's like a whole section to it, and none of the athletes eat it before they're done competing. But then when you're finished and you're out from a huge night out, you go back to the McDonald's and you wait for the breakfast menu to flip over. So it would flip at like 5 a.m. and the cafeteria is just packed with athletes, like, you know, probably should be in bed at this point in the state that they're in, but you're waiting for your 3 McSandwiches, whatever, so and your milkshake, because you haven't been able to have it for a few years.
Wow.
Well, leading up to it, is it regulated in any way? Like, do you have to report to us like a nutrition coach or anything like that, to where, you know, they make sure that you're not doing things you're not supposed to be doing?
So the women's rowing team just started working with a nutritionist like a couple of years ago. That we didn't when I was leading up to London. You're definitely conscious of it, because weight is a factor in rowing. If you're heavier and you're not moving your body weight, then you're less efficient on the water. So you want to make sure that at whatever weight you are at, you can support that with your strength and your power. I'm one of the smaller girls, if you can believe that. So I'm almost 6 feet. During training, I was right around 160, and I look tiny on the team. The majority of the girls are over 6 feet, upwards of 175, and so I had to find a way to compete against those girls. I had to basically be stronger, tougher, and row better. So nobody was checking on us, really, but it's something that you're just conscious of because you want to make sure that you're moving your weight.
Okay, so I picture it being like a CIA agent following you around every move and saying, we got Hendershot in the drive-thru at Burger King, or, you know, we got Hendershot buying a bottle of wine. So they're not on you to that extent. It's up to you.
No.
Well, I mean,
it's up to you.
Yeah, if you're on that level of as an athlete, you're probably already used to doing that anyway.
Yeah, and you start to realize that your body is fueled by what you're putting into it, right? So, like, even leading up to London, I thought I was eating healthy, and that was before I really started to educate myself on nutrition. Once I realized like how much better I could be performing based on my nutrition, I completely changed that, and I gave up even more. Like, I gave up all forms of bread and wheat and sugar. I very rarely had like a glass of wine, and it was because I was always thinking about like, how's this going to affect my next performance, and it's just not worth it when you're putting in so much time and energy and you're sacrificing that much.
Yeah, that mindset and that discipline is fierce. I mean, here I am, I'm thinking about the partying and thinking, wow, I would love to get down there and get finished with my events and just party my ass off. And I think you don't make it to the Olympics with a mindset of wanting to get down there and party your ass off. You want to get down there and perform and be a champ.
That's just the reward at the end.
And so how did you do at the 2012 London Olympics?
So I finished 4th by about this much. At one point leading to the last 100 meters, I was in 2nd. I looked over, so I was sitting in the bow seat. So for the women's pair, you're either in the stroke seat, which is the leader of the tempo, or you're in the bow seat, where actually that role is I was the voice of the boat. So I would make all of our calls, and I would say when we needed to make pushes, and I'm the one that looks out to see what our position is and then tells my partner that. So I looked out with about 10 strokes to go, and we were in silver position. But we had been so aggressive with getting ourselves into a medaling position with about 3 minutes left to go in the race that in the last 10 strokes there was nothing left. It was sad, to be that close and to miss a medal, but I think it's also what sucked me in for my next cycle, because I think if I had walked away with bronze, I probably would have been done. And so at the end of the day, I'm actually thankful for that 4th place finish, because it led me on to discovering all this other stuff that I got to do in the last cycle, and has changed me dramatically. And I feel like I wouldn't be on this path if it hadn't been for that.
I love that.
So when you say all this new stuff in the last cycle, is that what you mean when you were saying you went and trained with Brian McKenzie and all that? Did you actually up and move to California, or what? How did that all transpire?
I did. So I moved to California in the winter of 2014, I think it was. Yeah, 2014. Ended up living in California for a year and working with Brian and Erin. After that was over, I basically decided, like, I had learned a ton from them, and I needed to go now learn some new things from a couple different rowing coaches. So moved to Boston for a little while to work with Charlie Butt, who's the head men's coach at the Hartford rowing team. Probably one of the top minds and coaches of rowing in our country. And so he then really took my rowing to the next level. So I feel like my movement, my strength had changed a lot in that first year of this changing cycle after leaving the training center. And then my rowing really improved after moving back to Boston, getting back in the boat with my partner from 2012, Sarah Zelenka, now Sarah McElduff. And then I started traveling around the world looking for competition. When you're in the training center, you have the girls there to compete against and push you every day. And what I realized about myself is that I am very externally motivated, for good or for bad, because I've heard from a lot of people that that's not necessarily a good thing to be externally motivated. You need to find something internal. But part of what I figured out on this journey is that, for me at least, in certain areas, it's better to just embrace the parts of you that are and adapt to them and find ways to make them work for you, than it is to fight so hard to try to change something that's innate like that. And so I'm externally motivated. I needed to find competition. And most of the women to compete against were at the training center, and since I wasn't in that group and wasn't able to compete against them every day, I needed to go out and find it somewhere else. So we lived in New Zealand for a couple of months training with their national team. And they let us come and become a part of their group, and that was huge because the New Zealand women's pair just won silver in Rio, and we were racing against her every day. And that was just such a great experience for us to fine-tune a lot of our rowing skills, and then incredible for us to be able to travel all over the world and meet all these different people.
So as an Olympic athlete, what you were saying just a second ago about being externally motivated and being aware of the environment around you, do you have insecurities just the same as any normal person would? How do you handle people that don't agree with how you're training or what you do, or how do you handle your insecurities?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that there's like a few different insecurities that popped up throughout my elite rowing career. One of them was something I had to get over basically as I jumped onto the national team, which was just my body image. I realized pretty early on that I was going to gain a lot of muscle and I was going to start to look strong, and it wasn't something that I was super comfortable with in the beginning. And then once I really started to realize, like, no, my body is my tool, and look at the incredible things I'm doing with my body. I got to be proud of what it's doing. It really just that all went away because I realized that I was doing something special that not everybody could do, and like my muscles were a part of that. That was one thing. When I was training on my own, one of my insecurities was just that I was never doing enough. And that was scary, and it was like a big part of the fear that we were talking about before, was trying to make sure, like, am I doing enough? I don't know. I'm not at the training center. I'm not looking at all these other girls every day. I don't see what they're doing exactly. I know kind of what they're doing because I've been there before and I followed that training plan, but I don't know how I stack up against them right now. Dealing with that insecurity was really about me looking at myself and comparing myself to myself. And realizing, okay, I feel better than I've ever felt before, so that means something. My personal numbers are better than they've ever been before, so that means something. And really, like, all I can control is me, so stop worrying so much about what everybody else is doing and worry about you. And then, yeah, the last part being dealing with the haters who thought that what I was doing was stupid, and people came up to me and said it to my face. And then things like a girl that I invited to my wedding, who I thought was like a really close friend of mine, I ended up hearing was saying stuff like that at my wedding behind my back, like, oh, what a dumb move that is for her to try to train this way. She'll never be able to make it. Like, those things definitely hurt, but at the end of the day, it just motivated me more. because I wanted to prove those people wrong, and I wanted to show that there was more than one way to achieve elite fitness. And even though I didn't end up making the Rio team, and so like a lot of people I'm sure will look at that as a failure, and they'll say, well, you couldn't do it, so like clearly you proved that your way didn't work. I disagree. I think that what I proved is that there's another way to create athletic health in rowing nationally. You don't need to be chronically injured to hit the elite level, and that's something that our system is still struggling with. Every single girl but one that made the Rio squad for rowing this cycle had some period of injury over the last 4 years, and I don't think that's necessary. I think that we should be looking at our sport as a skill-based sport, and by focusing on movement and strength, you end up avoiding a lot of those problems. So I see that there is like a lot of success in what I did, and I think that I proved that what I did does work, because I performed nationally against all of my other old teammates from the training center. I bested myself, and I stayed healthy, and I figured out a way to do it while I was really happy in the process. So I think that's a success.
Anybody that gets to your level of competition and believes that they didn't get far enough or didn't do good enough, that's a real problem, because that's incredible.
I'm just curious, did you make this decision because you knew Aaron, or had you come across CrossFit at some point and then kind of got introduced to this whole way of thinking?
No, Aaron definitely introduced me to it. So Aaron was secretly doing CrossFit on the side leading up to the London Olympics, which was so funny because nobody really knew it. She was doing it on her own, but she was outperforming so many girls on the team, and nobody really knew why. And so I looked to her as such a role model, being like I want to be like her. She's one of the smaller girls. She was kicking everybody's butt. And so when I called her up to tell her what was going on with my injury and that I didn't really know what to do, she's the one who pushed me towards this direction. And I'm really thankful for that, because she taught me a ton. And now I feel like I've taken what Aaron has taught me from the CrossFit world, and then I've adapted it to really fit like who I am as a rower, and I've combined it with a lot of other things that I've learned from these other rowing coaches and from spending time with the New Zealand rowing program, and I made it into something that works specifically for me as an athlete. And that's the other part of this that I think is really important. There probably isn't one training program or fitness program that fits every individual. There's no real one-size-fits-all, and that's why I think you see our swimming team and our track team doing so well, is because the way those systems are implemented is that you can train as an individual under your own coach, follow whatever plan you need to that makes you the best athlete, and then you show up on trials day and perform. And I think that's why those athletes all do so well. And so I was trying to do something similar, basically find the best plan that worked the best for me. And I do really think that I found that. And, our single sculler from Rio, she won silver this year, which is huge. It's the first Olympic medal that we've won in that boat class since 2008. And so that's really exciting. And I think she did the same thing. She found a system that worked for her. And you can do that when you're in a one-person boat, right? Because you can make it work for you. But I just think that's an important thing for our sport to keep in mind.
Back to the topic of self-acceptance and self-esteem and security, is there a point where you felt more fulfilled than the other as far as winning the world championship or making it to the Olympics, or where you are now? Do you think that where you are now is the best place that you've ever been?
Yes, I do. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you that the last 2 weeks while I was watching the Olympics was all sunshines and rainbows, because it wasn't. I was really sad for a lot of that, watching this Team USA and a lot of the girls that I had trained against and with over the last 4 years that got to go and compete and bring home medals, and I'm so proud of them. But it was hard because I wanted to be there, and I felt like I had put in a lot of time and I was that close. But where I am now personally, and the growth that I've made over the last 4 years, just has put me into such a better place than after London. And I'm sure some of that is just age. Like, I'm 28 now, I'm married, I've got a little bit more perspective on life. I know I'm still young, but I just was able to face a lot of things that I never thought I'd be able to face and overcome over the last 4 years, and that makes me really fulfilled and very proud. Versus leading up to London, I did really well, and I'm extremely proud of that as well, but it was different because I had a lot less ownership over the process, and I didn't have any say in my training plan or when I had to show up where, or who I was going to work with, or who I was going to row with. And so to be able to be more engaged in the process, I think always just leads to a more fulfilling result.
Well, I hear a lot of realness and reality in you, and I think that that's what attracts me most, is the fact that you're taking from this something and putting it to real life, as opposed to making it to being an Olympic athlete or a world champion and that being your only identity. And that's what you have to hold onto forever.
Yeah, I think so, and I also realize now that I have more to give back to the world in 2016 than I did in 2012. And I think it's great that Olympic athletes are inspiring, and you can watch them and take something away from their greatness. But I actually feel like I can contribute to society more now, or I can contribute to my sport in the world of rowing in a more positive way than I would have in 2012.
So what are you going to do now?
So my husband and I have just launched a training and coaching program. The rowing version of it is called Rowfficient. So we're taking what we learned over the last Olympic cycle, and we're trying to pass it on. And actually a big detail that I left out while we've been talking is that throughout a lot of this journey, my husband was my rowing coach. So he moved to California with me, and then when we moved to Boston, he was with me, and when we moved to New Zealand, he was with me, and so we got to do that whole experience together. And he was a rowing coach at Princeton for 4 years before that, so he brought that experience as well, but then was in this journey learning with me as we went. And so he's a better coach for it. I'm a better athlete for all of that, and now I'm becoming a better coach as well. And he's really kind of teaching me how to do that. We're so lucky because we're working with athletes from across the whole span. We're working with juniors, we're working with collegiate athletes, working with masters, and we're just signed on a couple of Olympic hopefuls. So that's really exciting that we feel like that we can pass on what we've learned and help them to find their biggest potential.
Do you feel like you get the same adrenaline running and building Rowfficient as you do training for the Olympics and big competitions?
It's a little different. You definitely get addicted to the adrenaline of sitting on the starting line or sitting on the rowing machine right before you're doing an erg test, and you think to yourself, like, why do I do this to myself? I don't know why. I'm so sick to my stomach over this feeling right now. And then the starting gun goes off and you're like, that's why I do it. Oh yeah, I remember. And so I miss that. I'm going to have to find that somewhere else. I know it. I will find something to compete in. I'm not sure what it is yet. Maybe CrossFit a little bit. I don't know. But it's fulfilling in a different way because it's so awesome to see the face of an athlete light up when something clicks for them, or when all of a sudden a concept makes sense, or they make a huge improvement and they're so freaking proud of themselves. So that's really exciting to be able to watch and experience. It's just a little different.
So tell me what your day looks like from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. Do you have routines and practices that you perform every day? What does your nutrition look like? How many hours of sleep do you get at night?
So are you asking about me now or me when I was training full time? Because that's different.
Full time.
Okay. So training full time, I would be up at about 6 a.m. and we'd have our pre-row breakfast, out the door by 6:30, and warming up, getting on the water by between 7:15 and 7:30. Became really big on what my warm-up was, and what part of that whole system I realized was getting myself mobile enough to get into the best position was a huge factor. So I used to stretch and touch my toes and do the pigeon stretch, and I thought that was enough to get me ready for the water. And so my mobility program actually became much more involved and a huge important part of my training. So we do that. Let's say we're on the water at 7:30. I'm on the water until 9:30, and then we come back off the water. I'm taking nutrition the whole time I'm out there. So I'm a huge fan of the protein supplement 3 Fuel. That changed my life. I stopped bonking during workouts. It just really was a great way to sustain my energy throughout a whole session. Off the water at 9:30, doing some more mobility, heading back home, eating a giant breakfast. So a lot of times we did meal prep so that as soon as we'd come home, we'd have something ready. And my most favorite thing to do was these egg muffins. So that all we'd have to do is heat them up and pop some bacon in the oven, and then you have a huge breakfast ready to go. So I'm eating by about 10:30. I'm showered. Then I'm in bed from 11:30 to 1. Trying to, sometimes not totally able to fall asleep, but definitely getting a nap in, and it's always around an hour. And then I'd be up at 1 when I was working. I'd be working from 1 to 3 for Smack Media, and then having lunch, getting ready for my next practice, heading either to the gym, or usually we were cross training or going to the gym in the afternoon. Sometimes we were going for another row. And then my gym session would usually be from like 3 to 5 or 3 to 5:30. Again, like taking in nutrition that whole time. And then by 5:30, come home, eating by 6 or 6:30, huge dinner, and then usually having like a pre-bed snack around 8 after I'm just like trying to do a little bit more work or recovering or like getting to rest a little bit, and then asleep by 8 or 8:30 every night, and then up again at 6. So it's a lot of sleep, but it was totally necessary. I was definitely getting between 9 and 10 hours every single night, and then nap. And that was huge for me, because when you're trying to train with such high intensity on a regular basis, you have to be recovered in order to be able to show back up the next day. So my nutrition was what I look at that as a big part of my recovery. Like eating the proper foods helped me to recover. I did different things, like I had an eStim portable device, the Mark Pro, which was like my most favorite thing. I would put that on my legs before naps and before bed to get my body flushed and like staying off my feet. And then sometimes in there was like a chiro session or something stuck in there throughout the day. So yeah, I mean, it was like a full day pretty much of focusing on how I'm going to perform in my next session.
What about now?
It's different. I'm up now around 6, having something to eat, heading to the gym, working out until about 8 or 8:30, coming home, showering, and then getting to work. So because I run my own company and I am still actually working for Smack Media remotely, I'm going to coffee shops or working out of my apartment office and doing that until lunchtime, having lunch. And then I've been lucky enough that I've been throwing in some afternoon workouts too, because I just start to get like, anxious from sitting for too long or from like not moving around enough. But staying up a little bit later, having a few more glasses of wines here and there than normal, not being as strict with my diet because I don't have to be. It makes me feel good to eat well, so I do still eat really well. But I'm not as crazy about, if it's somebody's birthday party, I'll have a piece of cake. I used to not do that.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, are you so trained and honed into your nutrition that it's just not even an issue? You eat like this or you eat like that? Or are you at a place where you're conscious of it and you try to eat well, but it still means so much to you because you feel good from your nutrition?
Well, it's a habit. Not really. Maybe a little bit now, just because my motivation for eating well is more of like, okay, I want to feel good, and yeah, I'd like to look good too, but it's not as much with the end goal of like, this is going to make me perform. So I guess the motivation for eating well is a little bit different. But in general, it's like a habit now, because you create these habits, you teach yourself to follow them, and then it makes more sense to follow them than to go back. And my body's really sensitive to unhealthy foods now. So that's something that's crazy. Like once I adapted to using all this nutritious food as my fuel, when I have wheat or I have too much sugar, my body feels it. Like I get a sugar hangover, or I'll get really bloated from having bread, and my body didn't used to do that. So yeah, I'm a little more sensitive to unhealthy foods, and I think my body just craves the good stuff, so that's enough of a reason to kind of keep eating well.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for even knowing what it is that you're reacting to, knowing what your food allergies are and what you can't take. Whereas somebody like me just knows, I eat this and I feel like crap. I don't know what's in it that's making me feel like crap. I just know I feel like crap.
Yeah, you become more conscious of those things. And then also we did blood work a lot. That was really an important part of my training. So we would track my biomarkers and making sure that, my numbers were all where they were supposed to be. And I used food as the primary way of shifting my numbers instead of like doing too many supplements. I was much more of a believer of healing yourself through nutrition, and that worked for me.
You said that you did cross training. What does cross training look like? Is that running, lifting? Did you do weights throughout? And is your cardio all rowing, or did you do running and biking and things like that?
Yeah, sometimes we would do running, or we would do the assault bike or the watt bike. Those are great translations to the rowing stroke. But the gym was a big part of our cross training because we always had some kind of an aerobic component as it. So like if you follow CrossFit and you know what like a metabolic conditioning WOD is at the end of a session, like we threw those in a lot. And typically we would do 3 weight training sessions a week. The first one of the week was just strength, really, really strength heavy. The second one of the week usually had something like an 8 to 15 minute WOD at the end, like a real burner to kind of simulate what that 2K feeling is like. And then at the end of the week, we would have a WOD that was usually somewhere between like 30 and 40 minutes long. So like a chipper or something like big and long. And that would just be the way that we'd finish off the week. And those were brutal, but I loved them. And what those ended up teaching me, which I think advanced me as a rower and an athlete overall, was how to pace things. Like, how should I be feeling a quarter of the way through whatever we're doing? And so whether that's a 7-minute rowing race or that's a 22-minute 6K erg test for rowing, like, you're just starting to figure out, okay, when I'm a quarter of the way through, when I'm halfway through, this is how I should feel. This is how long I can sustain my red line for without toppling over the edge. And that was something that I think was just huge, and we're implementing for our athletes now.
Well, what do you see? What's next for you?
So athletically, I don't know. I actually haven't taken rowing completely off the table yet. It's off the table for this year. I'm definitely taking a step back. I think I need that. It's good for your mental health and your physical health. But I don't know whether that's something that I'll go back to down the road, or will I fall into CrossFit and love that and try to become a regionals athlete? I don't know. Athletically, I'm not sure yet. As far as my goals, like career-wise, I'm really excited to keep pushing Rowfficient. You know, I want to make a mark on the rowing world in the U.S. I think there is a room for us to grow and change as a country within this sport, and I hope that I can like make a mark on it and be a part of that positive change. So that's like my big picture goal. I hope to work with some other athletes that can have big positive experiences that can go on to win medals at Olympics, and just like give them an engaging process to be a part of.
Tell us where to find Rowfficient and where to find Sara Hendershot and who to follow and when.
Well, I'm all over social media just at Sara Hendershot, and I don't have an H at the end of my name, so there's just one H for the Hendershot. And then we also, all of our social media handles for Rowfficient is just at Rowfficient. You can go to rowfficient.com. That'll transfer you over to our website. And yeah, give us a follow. We're doing some interesting stuff.
We will do that. I've already got you on most social media, so we look forward to keeping up with you. I know you will leave a mark. You're clearly driven enough, and once you set your mind to do something, you'll do it. So I look forward to keeping up with you, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the show with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. This was fun. It's always really fun to talk about my story. So thank you.